Hey there, my name is Helper Wesley, and today I'll be talking about the general layout of GDevelop. I won't be going too far into any one topic, but this video should be useful to anybody who's new to GDevelop or someone who already uses GDevelop but feels like they've missed a feature. When you first download GDevelop, you'll be met with this screen. From here you can open an existing project or start a brand new one. When you click on Create a New Project, you'll be given a bunch of options for starter games and examples. We're going to skip all those for now, and just go straight for a blank game. When you start from scratch like this, you need to add a new scene, which is where you'll actually make the game. To keep things organized, it's important to make sure that you give your scenes appropriate titles. Since we opened a blank game project, we need to open some of the panels. Up here in the top right corner, you'll see some of the options. You'll also have the ability to add a grid to your game project to help organize things, and to change the level of zoom. Let's start with the object panel. This is where you're going to import and manage your game objects. Everything from your characters to your tiles to your particle effects will all show up in this panel. We'll start by creating a sprite, the most commonly used game object. You should make sure to give this a title that makes sense. Click Add an Animation, find the art that you want to use, and open it. Be sure to click Apply to save any work that you've done. And then you can just drag the object straight from the panel into the game space. You can drag to click on multiple objects at a time, and use the middle mouse button to move the scene around and zoom in and out. The next panel over is for object groups. It's a useful tool that lets you target a group of objects as opposed to each individual one when you want to do things with them. For example, I could have a bunch of hearts and potions and food items and call all of them healing items, and then I could make a single event that makes it so that if the player is in collision with one of those healing items, they get healed, instead of making a different event for every single item in the list. Next up is the Properties panel. When this panel is open and you click on an object, you'll get to see their position, z-order, angle, and so on. And from this panel you can actually control all of those things, moving them around, changing their angle, and changing their z-order, which is what decides whether an object is behind or in front of another one. And that's a good transition to talking about layers. With the Layers panel, you can create different layers to place objects on. So you can create a foreground, midground, and background, as well as UI layers and menu layers. Typically you'll put most of your game objects on the base layer, and have that camera following the player, while having all of your UI objects and menus on different layers where the camera is stationary. From this panel you can also add effects to layers, edit their properties, and toggle their visibility. Back to the Properties panel, you can also use this panel to resize objects. But be careful while doing this because changing an image's resolution can really make it blurry. The last panel is for the instance list. This can be a useful tool for finding where things are in your game project, especially once they've gotten so big that you can't tell where things are anymore. You'll notice these window tabs up top. The start page and then your main scene page, where all of the game building is done, and then that scene's event list, where all of the black magic happens. But we'll get to that in another video. Up in the top left you can open your project manager, and in the game settings you'll find Properties. This is where you'll do things like change the game's name, give it a version number, a package name, an author, log in with your profile, and change the game's resolution, which is something you should definitely do, because very few devices are defaulted to 800 by 600. You can also tell the engine here how to expand the game to meet the size of the screen that it's in, as well as tweaking the max and min frame rates that the game will run at. For mobile devices, you can choose whether the game runs in portrait mode or landscape mode, and then you can turn on and off anti-aliasing. The only real reason you would turn this feature off is if your game uses pixel art. And if your game is running ads, then this is where you would slot in your app ID. You can also edit the game's initial loading screen from here. The rest of the project game settings has global variables, which we'll get to at another time, icons, which are your desktop and mobile app icons, and resources, which is where you can go to see all the assets that are in your game file. There are a few options here that you might need, like when individual objects are blurry or if an object or sound effect is stuttering before it loads in. The rest of the project tab has the scenes that we've already talked about, external events and layouts, which we plan to explain in another video, and then functions and behaviors. And if you wanted to use the pre-built extensions that include things like giving the enemies health and different movement systems, then this would be the place to get those. And we're going to tackle that in another video as well. Let's close this project and open one of the starter games. You'll see that all of the game's objects have loaded into the Objects panel, as well as the events and the game itself. Now in the top left corner, the two last things to talk about are the export button, which is what you would use when you're finished building your game and you want to release it to the public, and the preview button, which is what you would use to playtest your own game. When you click this button, it will play from whichever scene you're on currently. It'll open up a window, and I can just play. One last thing though before you go. This is something that I didn't know about, even though I've used the engine for over 2 years. And you see all of these panels? They can all move. Now this isn't revolutionary, but this does allow you to customize your workspace and set it up so that it works best for you. Though this is probably not how the developers thought people would use it. Please comment down below and tell us what sort of tutorials we should do next. Maybe we'll add them to the pile. I have been Helper Wesley, and I'm glad I could help.